Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to check out the music panel. My name is Georgie Luttrell. I'm super excited to be moderating. So Wynonna Earp has a lot of music that we love. There's that perfect song for that way hot moment, or that beautiful sort of building Wynonna theme. We have some incredible people to thank for that. And I'd like to introduce them up here. We have Andrea Higgins. Head of Music Supervision for Arpix Media and Music Supervisor Extraordinaire for Wynonna Earp. And then we have, go ahead. Then we have the incredibly talented Rob, Carli, and Peter Chapman. Hi. So thank you guys so much for being here today. It's really cool that we get to take the time to talk about the music. Something that I love about Wynonna Earp is how invested everyone is in every aspect of the show. I feel like with a lot of other TV shows, people like the music supervisor or the composers may be sometimes overlooked. People might not often know their names, but with you guys, everybody knows who you are. How does it feel to be here in front of an audience that watches your work?
I think it's a big thrill. First of all, thanks for having us. I think this, I've only been here for 25 minutes, and I'm planning on sticking around for a bit. And just to see when I came in, I guess everyone's lining up for maybe a photo session with Way Hot or something this morning. And it's just a massive amount of people. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And it's a testament to the fans of this show. And the reason why, this show is going into season 4 now is because of you guys. So thank you. And thanks for having us. And I'm really excited to sit here with my colleagues and talk about tunes.
I think we're all pretty excited about that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out. The support for the music, the score, the songs has been kind of overwhelming. It's awesome. It's really cool that you guys are here and that you like what we're doing.
Awesome. So I kind of want to start by just asking you guys how you all got into working music-wise in the film and TV industry, how you kind of got your start and ended up at Wynonna.
Go.
So I played music growing up. I'm a drummer. I play guitar. I played in bands. I grew up, in dance and all kinds of, artsy things. And after high school, my ultimate career goal was to work for A&R at a record company. And so I went to an audio production school called the Harris Institute and learned about all aspects of the music industry, from producing and engineering to live sound to artist management and publishing. And I started doing internships, kind of different companies in the music industry. One at a record label, Universal, and then I moved to publishing at Sony ATV Music, and that's where I worked in the publishing department and learned about pitching music to film and television, and discovered that a music supervisor for a film or TV show was an actual job. And I thought, oh my God, that's what I want to do. I thought it'd be cooler to find, instead of finding, scouting music for a record label, it'd be funner to scout music for TV shows, because I just think it's more diverse. And I don't know, I just grew up loving film soundtracks. That's kind of how I discovered music growing up, different kinds of music that wasn't just played on the radio. And that led me to finding Arpix Media, and basically my big goal was, I'm going to find someone who does that in Canada and work for them. And so that's what I did. And I've been working there ever since, and started out assisting and kind of worked my way up to Wynonna Earp. In a nutshell.
Right to the top, to Wynonna Earp. So I like Andrea, I started out as a musician at a pretty young age playing piano. I had to take piano lessons, which I hated. But I kind of stuck with it until I was about 10 or 12, and then I discovered the saxophone, and that's my main instrument, and I played saxophone. Yeah, right?
The devil's horn.
The devil's horn. That's it. There's actually
remember that quote.
The sound of, yeah, we'll get to that. There's a saxophone in Wynonna's score, which is hard to describe. But anyway, I played music for a long time, and then like Andrea, I was like, hey, writing film music is a job. That's a cool gig, and I wanted to do that. So I was writing music, and I was always fascinated by scores in high school, and decided to pursue a degree in composition and performance here in Toronto, and I did that. And then I was playing a lot. I was kind of just gigging, and I was playing with orchestras. I'm kind of a classically trained musician, so that taught me a whole lot about orchestration. And by the time, about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years after graduating, having, kept trying to pedal music and learn about music for film and working as an assistant, I ended up starting to get small composing gigs for screen. And that just, I've been doing that now for 20 years almost, and sort of snowballed, and it all roads lead to Wynonna Earp.
All roads lead to purgatory.
And so there's, this is actually interesting, but this is probably my first collaboration ever with another composer was with a guy named Chapman about 5 or 6 years ago. But that was very short-lived because it was for complicated reasons. I think this show didn't have the legs, but this show was our first real, I don't know about for you, but for me, my first collaboration. And so we'll speak to that a little bit, but I've been working with this guy for a few years and having a pretty good time doing it.
Mm-hmm. So I got into it. I grew up playing in bands, doing all that stuff, did like piano lessons, guitar lessons. And I knew early on that I didn't want to do the band thing. I worked in a guitar store in Kensington Market for 8 years. So I saw a lot of like washed up band members coming in, and I saw it and I was just like, I know how this is going to end. I don't want to do this. So I started getting into commercials. I had some friends that started a little company that wrote music for commercials. So I started doing that. And during that time, I was playing in this really kind of snotty garage rock band. And we started playing shows with this other really snotty garage rock band that Andrea played drums in, which you guys should look up. They're called Shit Hot with 3 T's and 2 T's, yeah. I think. SHITTTHOTT. Awesome band. And so we actually met through that, and I recorded their record, and Andrea and I became fast friends. And I had told her, like, I want to get into television composing. And this goes back over 10 years at this point. So at that point, she was working with Arpix, and she started kind of throwing me little scraps of work here and there, like whenever they needed a piece of music, but they didn't want to like license a big band for it, she'd get me to write it. And then that sort of snowballed, and eventually, I think, she got me hired onto my first show 10 years ago called Durham County. And then it's just sort of snowballed since
She
then.
owes you a lot.
She owes me a lot, right?
Sorry, you owe her a lot.
Yeah, more like it.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So
Andrea rarely pays for dinner when we're hanging out. It's just like...
What I think is interesting about how this is, Wynonna Earp was sort of your first big collaboration between the two composers. What I think is interesting is that you both sort of come from the different musical backgrounds, and that really makes the music on the show blend together really interesting. And it's, did you guys find that it was easy coming from different musical backgrounds to kind of find that sound between like the orchestral and the sort of electronic mix?
It's interesting. It started very sort of, the original blueprint was a very kind of like the road plan was originally that like Rob is an incredible orchestral arranger and composer, and then my skill set tended to revolve more around like sound design and electronic stuff. And so when we started, it was kind of like, all right, I'll do kind of the cool synth stuff and you'll do the awesome orchestral stuff. But then we both really started rubbing off on each other, and I started sort of jacking Rob, doing my best to jack Rob's style in a lot of orchestral stuff, and then he started taking over a lot of electronic stuff. Now there are cues where I can't remember who wrote them sometimes. Like
it does happen. Yeah. Hopefully the score is successful in being seamless and that you can't tell that there are two different heads combining to make one soundtrack. And I think we're getting it, because I don't know sometimes what stuff is mine and his when we watch playback. So, I mean, you kind of know but as you probably are aware, we write the music and then the schedule is pretty tight. So we often are on shows and we forget what show we're on when we go to a playback, which is the end process during the audio mix, where all of the elements of sound design and dialogue and music all get combined, and Emily will come to that, and we will watch the show, but we often forget even what show we're watching until you're about halfway through, and then you go, oh, but this episode, of course. So that's what we're referring to. We don't know who wrote the music. It's a genuine kind of thing where a few weeks might pass and you just don't remember.
When you all came on to the project, Wynonna Earp, what was the sort of initial pitch you were given in terms of like the soundscape, how the show like would feel in terms of the music? Like, did Emily say, we want it to feel like this, we want the music to feel like this Western, or what was the sort of pitch?
Yeah, well, the first pitch was, crazy chick with a gun. And I thought, I got you. No, one of the initial discussions was, how Western do we want the show to sound? And it kind of was like a hint of Western, but it's like a Western, but not a Western. And yeah, the music, we wanted a hint of it, but not full blown. So we talked about Emily and I just talked about different band ideas and just a handful of songs that she really loved and listened to while she was writing. And I built a playlist around that, and we knew that there was going to be the badass, Wynonna riding a motorcycle, kicking ass songs, but also that there was a real emotional core to the show with the sisters. And initially I just kind of started building playlists around the different characters, not right off the top, but kind of eased into that once I started getting more familiar with the episodes. Because when you start a show, you just kind of figure it out as you go. You kind of start in one place and say, this is what we want to do, but sometimes you kind of end up in another place, and then you're like, oh yeah, this feels good. So it was the big note was like no Western music. And then we kind of just snuck it in a little bit. Like with, Doc, he kind of has a sound, and sometimes there's a bit of Western influence, but in a cool, hip way.
Even like in the score, like the obvious thing, it would have been like twang guitars and, like dun, 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 like, but that was definitely a definite no. The only we did it
weren't allowed
once
to do that in the score.
In season 2, I can't remember what episode, but it was the one where the sheriff guy came back, and he was like a full-on, like, what was
the
his
dude with the big mustache, the big cowboy hats.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember his name. The shows are all like one mashed pool in my head at this point, because you go through them so fast. But that was the one episode where we talked to Emily and we were like, we gotta go a little twangy on this guy.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we started, when we were figuring things out, it sort of started in a weird twangy place, and that's where we got the immediate like, no, don't do that. And when Rob and Peter came on board, that's really how we came to Rob and Peter. Emily was like, I want a big orchestral, Marvel superhero show, and I want it to sound cool and modern and incorporate, like synthesizers and cool sound design, but also there's this emotional core within it, and that's kind of how we came to putting Rob and Peter together.
It was her idea. She takes the blame for putting us together. So yeah.
Awesome. So when you get an episode, how do you sort of first approach it? Do you sort of watch through the scenes and play to the emotional beats?
That's a good question. That's a big question. We get what's called a locked picture. I guess even before that, you read the script. You have to, because if there's any songs referenced in the script, or if there's any musical moments, or if they're in a bar, Andrea has a heads up way before we do, because she has to go out and license tracks and needs to. Well, I'll let you speak to that, but there's a whole process that.
Yeah, so I'll get the scripts, and right before they shoot an episode, one of the producers, Brian, will call me up and say, "Hey, this is coming up in this episode. Take a look." And for example, the Waverly singing the like cabaret song in season 2, they're like, "Hey, Waves is gonna sing a song. We need a song. Let's figure that out." So then I'll have a conversation with Emily about like what type of song should it be? What are the themes of the lyrics? What do we want to say? And so yeah, I'll just put together ideas. Or what else happens? I don't want to give anything away. There's a few things coming up. But yeah, they'll call me in advance and say, "Hey, this is the type of episode that's coming up," or "We'll need something that we need to shoot with." So I'll figure it out in advance. But then, yeah, we get the shows.
Yeah, once the show is locked and they've shot it and it's been edited to time, then we can start working on it, because we work to a time code and we really can't deviate too much from that. So once the show, we have to wait until the picture is finalized. Otherwise, music could move around and it just gets really complicated. So all of the post people, like that would be dialogue and sound effects, Foley, and music, all get added after the locked picture. So that's like, for us, it's the starter's pistol. And when that happens, then we'll sit down and meet with Andrea and Emily. Often will come, or even Tom and Georgie, the other producers from out west, who I don't think are here this weekend, but some of you might be familiar with them. And we'll all sit in the room and we'll go through the episode and talk about beats. And obviously, when the show first started in season 1, those meetings were rather intense, because we were really trying to establish the sound of the show. And as we progressed through, into season 3, we all know the themes of the characters and we know the sound of the show. So it's not about trying to dissect the minutia of each scene and figuring out what's happening. We have a pretty good sense. So Pete and Andrea and I will sit down and watch the show, and then we have a fellow who works with us named Christian Berge, who gets a lot of credit because he does all of our sort of background stuff. He's our music assistant, but he also does some music on the show as well. And he'll take really careful notes about where the music will start for each scene and where it stops and what the tone, and if there's a specific note from Emily about what's got to happen, then we'll take all those notes and we'll sit down, and actually in our case we sit down and divide the show up between the two of us and go, "Well, Pete, you handle that cue, that sounds like a Pete cue, and I'll handle this." And then sometimes there's a big cue, like a 2.5 or 3 minute sequence, and then we'll split it between us. We'll actually have a process where we'll really literally share the composition of that long stretch of music.
And sometimes we find the songs really far in advance, like the scene where Waverly does the cheer.
I think you guys know that one.
I've only seen it a few times. They wanted to shoot the scene with knowing what song we were going to use. So they choreographed with that song instead of replacing it in post-production. So I'd pulled a bunch of song ideas, sent them to the director and to Emily, and then they chose, and then they built the whole, sequence around that song, and were able to cut with it. And that happened also with episode 303. We knew it was going to be a really emotional, crazy episode, and we wanted to get the songs as early as possible so that they could build the sequences around the song.
Now, I know, for example, with the scripts, they go through quite a few different drafts. In terms of the music, are there ever times when you've maybe found a bunch of music that you really liked for an episode, or you guys have put together something and sort of taken it to like a spotting session or something with Emily? And has there ever been instances where it's been like, "Oh, well, I don't really think that one's going to work," or "I really think another song would work better"? Does that happen?
That happens every episode. No, so we have what's called the spotting session. So once the episode is locked, which means none of the, there's a bunch of different edits that take place, and things change, and has to go through a series of approvals from there's a director's cut and then the producer's cut, and then it has to go to the network, to Sci-Fi, and they give their notes. So there's always kind of changes happening. But the lock is when nothing is going to change picture-wise. So that's when we get a hold of it. And I mean, sometimes I'll watch like a rough cut stage just to get an idea of where song spots could be, and I'll start doing my thing, and also budgeting for the episode. But yeah, we watch the episode together. We map out where we think there will be a song. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, like we're in the bar, but sometimes it's, oh, there's this sequence. Do we want to put like a montage? Is it going to be a song moment, or is it going to be a scored moment? And yeah, I talk to Emily about each scene, about the tone and style and what she's thinking. And I'll just pull a bunch of ideas together and play them for her. I'll cut them to picture. Actually, a fellow named Kyle Merkley, who I just spotted, he does all the music editing. He's fantastic. He's my right hand at our picks, and unsung hero of the music team.
Kyle, stand up, Kyle. Come on, stand up.
Stand up,
Come on,
Kyle. Stand up.
I'm spotted.
He's shy. So Kyle edits all the music, and we work on it together, and then we present it to Emily and the producers, and we go, "What do you think?" And then they pick. Yeah.
But there is that process, though, like, where things can change, and often, like, Pete and I will write a scene, or you'll submit a song, and when even as far as as late as the playback, when we go, you know what, this might not be working, and so we'll change things. Like you say, script revisions. It happens with music as well. Not very often, though, right? We usually hit it the first time. But there was a recent episode where the very end of the episode, the score, I felt actually the score wasn't entirely right. And Emily shared that. And I just said, well, let's just redo it. And so we do have, it doesn't happen very often, but right up to or a song could change where they'll have, or Emily or Andrea rather will bring, there hasn't been a final decision made. So after the playback, when you actually see the entire episode in its, front to back, with all the sounds and with all the effects and all the right dialogue, you might say, well, you know what, that song or that bit of score isn't working. And so there could be that revision process up until really, the very end.
And sometimes, I mean, it's such a fast process. Like usually, I feel like it's like we'll do an episode in like 3 days. It feels like between three or 4 days. Yeah, between the two of us, it's
it does go by quick.
And then it just like, and so you just like you write. It's just this like blur, and he'll write, and then you often don't see. Like it's not until you actually get to playback and you sit back and you relax and you can actually watch the episode and you see all the music playing out. And sometimes that's a moment when you're kind of like, there's too much music. Sometimes you're like, whoa, this is like,
you're writing this, you're populating every scene with music, and you don't realize until you sit down and get that chance to screen it that you think, well, we could probably have a break.
Mm-hmm.
Have you, Andrea, ever found a song that you've like felt in your bones? You're like, this is a slam dunk. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the theme.
The theme, yeah.
The theme felt like,
Like the theme. Yeah. I think that's a great theme.
Yeah, I pulled a bunch of ideas, but that one stood out for me. Like it just felt like this is the winner. Like this is it. I'll send you these alts, but I kind of highlighted and bolded and underlined, like, listen to this one. And it's funny how it came together, because it can be a really difficult process, because there's a lot of people who have a say, and music is so subjective. What resonates with one person may not resonate with another, and there's a lot of there's a bunch of producers on the series and the network, and everyone's say is important, but everybody, it felt like it came together. Everyone loved it. It came together really. I don't want to use the term easily, so it wasn't easy, but it just felt right.
Yeah, and speaking on the theme, I think last week when the credits rolled, we were all a little surprised to hear that super toned down acoustic version of Tell That Devil, and everybody on Twitter was like, wait, what? Since when?
That was a super last minute decision. We screened the episode together, and afterwards, Emily turned around and said, I have an idea. And she's like, you're going to kill me, but I have an idea. And because, we had to be finished all the revisions and fixes that day. We had a very small window of turnaround to, complete any fixes. And she said, what if we made a sad version of the theme song? And I think because the whole episode is just so sad and heavy that it felt really jarring to cut to our fun song. So I went, leave it with me. And I called Jill right away and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? We have this idea and we need it by tomorrow.
4 minutes.
And she was like, I'm on it. And I didn't know what was going to come back. Sometimes you have this really great idea, but when you get it back, you're like, oh, it's not kind of how I envisioned it in my head. But it came back and I went, oh my God. And so Kyle had cut in a couple versions and we sent it to Emily and the producers and they picked a version and in it went.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think in 302 was the first time that there was an episode that was just composed music. Was that strange to have an episode where there was no licensed sync music and it was just music that you two were putting together?
I didn't even realize that existed. But I don't think it's to us. I mean, no. I guess the short answer is no. It doesn't. It's just a show. I mean, we're following the story, and we sometimes feel like this is a song moment, but it didn't even occur to me that happened. That we just wrote. I mean, 302's when Dolls dies, so we thought there could be a song at the end, but somehow it just had a moment. It was so dramatic, and there was all that dialogue, really great writing between Melanie and Megan Follows, who plays her mother. And also Waverly. It was a really touching scene, and I just felt, we can score this, and it's gonna work. So, and when we did it, it was like, you know what, we don't need a song here. This is fun.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I thought it was, at least.
Yeah, it's always nice to write when someone dies.
It's hard. Now, I know you all sort of work on a bunch of different projects at the same time. And like you were saying, you sometimes forget what show am I working on right now? Is it hard to juggle the different sounds between the different projects you're working on? And is it sort of easy to slip back into the world of Wynonna when, say, you've been working on another show like Heartland or Murdoch Mysteries or anything like that?
No, it's not difficult. My brain just kind of switches. I just compartmentalize everything, and when I'm in Heartland mode, I'm in Heartland mode. When I'm in Earp mode, I'm in Earp mode. Killjoys, and every show has its own sound. And yeah, I'm able to just kind of switch back and forth. Yeah. I remember there was one year where I was working on the show Durham County with Peter, and it was really dark, heavy, dark show. There's, murder, and we're putting, really counterpoint songs against someone getting murdered brutally. And I'd go from that to Heartland, Girl on a Horse, Family, and just normal.
I sometimes have problems where, in season 2, I also write music for Working Moms, and then season 2 comes along and Danny Kind shows up, and suddenly I just start writing Working Moms
Danny
music.
fucking
Guys
Kind.
like Danny Kind? She's gonna be here tomorrow.
Yeah, that doesn't actually happen.
There was an episode. It's funny you mentioned. For me, it's the same. I don't have a problem switching between shows. But I work on a show called Frankie Drake on the CBC. Which
Watch that show.
There was an episode toward the end of the first season, and Melanie played the lead. And there was a scene where she first introduced, and I wrote a little bit of music, and it was kind of it wasn't really working, or something. I didn't like it, and so then I went back and what can I put here when we see this character, who's the sister of the star of the show. Or one of the stars, when she's revealed, and I just played the Wynonna theme as an inside joke, and the producers of Frankie Drake didn't know, and no one seemed to know, but I did make a little clip, and I think I sent Georgie and said, look at this, and it's kind of a fun little inside joke. And actually Mark Schwarninski, who is the sound effects cutter on Wynonna Earp and also on Frankie Drake. We were in playback, and nobody except for he and I are on both shows. And he just started laughing right away. It was like really inside joke.
I'm a big Frankie Drake fan, so that would have been hilarious if I'm watching.
It was fun. I'll look for that clip. I'll put that. I have to post it maybe discreetly or something. But yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So do you guys have a favorite episode so far and throughout the 3 seasons? Maybe like there's an episode where there's a song that it was just your favorite that you found for a moment, or a piece of music where you just love it so much.
It's hard to pick a full episode.
Or moments.
But moments, yeah, I definitely have favorite moments. Going to just start naming them off?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? One of my favorite moments for songs is was, I forget what number it was, but it was season 2 with the sisters at the foot of the bed, and they're comforting each other, and she's found out she's pregnant, and she gets the note from Doc that I'm all in. We put a song in there called Cool Cat.
Cry. It was so good. I like that.
Oh my God. I just cry every time. Every time I've seen it, I've cried. And that was one of those moments where I knew that was going to be the song. And I had a backup ready to go, but I played it for Emily and Georgie and Tom, and they were like, yep. I said, do you want to hear the alt? They were like, no. And yeah, that, I don't know, that was fun. When we bookend season 2 with Until We Go Down, that was a really fun moment. It was fun because we tried so many ideas in that spot. And then Kyle and I just had this eureka moment where we're like, because I remember thinking, I think it should sound like, I don't know, I want it to feel like Until We Go Down in episode 1. And we were like,
Just
wait,
use that song.
let's just use it again. And then it worked perfectly. And we were like, oh, of course.
It was such a great
It was
callback.
just right in front of us the whole time. We were just trying so hard to do something else, and it was right in front of us. And we were like, oh.
What about you guys?
Like particular scenes with music or particular episodes?
Either.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have favorite episodes. I have a favorite episode, but I can't talk about it.
Oh.
Which means the show
Me
just
too,
keeps
me
getting
too.
better and better, is all that means.
Yeah, there's
You won't tell anybody. You can tell us.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there are definitely moments. Like, I feel like there are definitely moments because sometimes, like, so we have a lot of theme songs that we write, and sometimes we write them in advance. Sometimes you just write them, when it's the first time you've seen a character, you write something, and then it turns out that character is a reoccurring thing. And so there are actually like a few defining moments in this series that like you didn't realize how important a theme you were writing was until the series progresses. So like there's one that Rob wrote. There's a scene in season 1 where I think it's Doc and Juan Carlos are chatting, and that was the first time we heard what has sort of become the Juan Carlos theme, which we've since it's become the Ghost River Triangle theme. So anytime there's like a lot of discussion about like the legend and lore of the Ghost River Triangle, there's this theme that often plays. And I remember Rob actually wrote that, and I remember hearing it, and I was just like, I think that was one of my favorite cues of the season. But neither one of us realized how important that scene was, that music was going to become. And then same with season 2, there was a scene at the end of, I think it might have been like episode 2, where the dynamite blows up next to the crate and lets the sisters out. There was just like some little bit of music leading up to that dynamite, and it exploded. And Emily came back. She's like, "Can you write something like spooky, this other thing, blah, blah, blah." And so I wrote this sort of harpsichord thing in a really weird time signature. And it was just like a little 12-second thing, but I didn't realize that 12-second piece of music was going to define their entire sort of existence for the rest of the season. And had I known that, I probably would have like put way more pressure on myself to write something good. But I was just like, this is kind of spooky. But that was like the first time that was written, and then it became sort of the sisters theme for all of season 2, which interestingly, it was really fun because it got adapted. It wasn't always played on harpsichord. Sometimes it was on synth. Sometimes it was on guitar, piano, and you could kind of play with it a bunch.
Awesome.
I think my favorite, I do have a favorite episode, I think. It's the one, when the writers do kind of unconventional things, I'm always really intrigued. And they did it in season 2 with the one where we went back in time and they explained a lot of stuff. And for us, musically, that was a very rich opportunity because we got to play kind of old style music, like player piano-ish kind of stuff. Plus, I used a lot of reversing sound effects, and Pete did some cool stuff. And it was just, for us, it was a lot of fun to write. And it was just a different episode. And to me, it stood out, and I really love that one. I think it's 207 or something.
What's your favorite episode?
Oh boy.
I want to know your favorite music moments.
Last night's episode.
I love the song in the first episode of the 3rd season with Wynonna riding the mechanical bull.
Oh my
I've
God,
been
I love
listening
that
to that song with my windows down on repeat.
Yeah, me too.
That was the whiskey. It's so good.
Yeah, I love that song so much.
It's perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I actually had that. I found that last season, and we never used it. And then when this scene came up, it was again one of those moments where I pulled a bunch of ideas together, but that was the one that I was like, please pick this one because it's amazing. And I would just walk around just listening to it on repeat all the time. And when I listen to something over and over and over and just like I'm obsessed with it, that's when I know like this is the one. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we have quite a little interesting sort of video presentation where we're kind of gonna.
Yeah, we thought we would talk a bit, like briefly, about the process of how we score a scene. It might be interesting. So we pulled something from last night's episode. We have 2 scenes, but we'll just maybe just do one for now. We'll see how much time we have. And we're going to walk you through our process. Now, we did refer already to what's called a lock picture, and this is the thing that Pete and I and Andrea will get to screen the episode. And oftentimes it's always cut with temp music, which they use almost exclusively our own music. I don't think they use anything else. They maybe at the beginning, and obviously in season 1, in the first few episodes, they were using just soundtracks from other places, but now they're really faithful to using our library. But we usually turn that off. So we're going to show you a scene, and actually this speaks to what Pete just mentioned about the idea that you have a little theme and you don't know when you're going to use it again. And I think the first time the character Bolsharf shows up in season 3, is it in episode 1? It probably is, yeah. And Pete wrote a little piano motif. It goes dee dee doo dee, and you're going to hear that. Eventually, we'll get there. But we didn't know what was going to happen. And as the season evolves, obviously he becomes a recurring character. And he was in that last night's episode, and we'll get to that. But first, we're going to show you the scene. This is the scene with Doc in the woods, and this is what we get. And you'll hear it without anything except for dialogue. Thanks, Dustin.
Doc? I'll be there in 2 shakes. Who is there? What child is that? No, don't take me back there! Don't take me back there!
It's really quiet.
You will do my bidding, John Henry Holliday.
It is you, bullshit.
I have many names. How shall I coerce you? With pain? You felt it before. The searing, tortuous agony. Or with the promise of reprieve?
Free from what?
The reminders of your destiny. Of the eternal suffering you will endure.
At what cost?
A simple exchange.
Doc! Doc! Where am I? Where did he go? Who?
You can cut it there. So we
Slow
get that
down.
scene and we decide, okay, we need music in that scene. Now you notice the front half, there's a lot of sound design. I mean, Doc is disoriented in the woods and you hear the baby sound effect. And I'm not sure how much of that baby ended up in the final, but was it there? But it was just an idea. What they do is they have to cut in sound effects and they think, well, we'll have a baby and then they'll have just different. So you hear those were temp sound effects. And we actually worked with those temp sound effects because the front part of that score was going to be sound design. It was going to be like kind of weird, eerie sounds. And we had some cello and some different things. And we thought, well, the actual music proper, if you will start when he begins his dream or his vision of Bolshar. That's when the theme will start. And so the front half, it's all, and also we knew that sound effects and sound design would play a huge part in that front part. And you know, when I said it gets really quiet, there's nothing there. And obviously that's where the music kind of takes a front position. So thanks to Dustin on audio today, he's going to now play the same. Do you want to say anything about the scene? How about spotting it? What we thought? We knew the Bolshar theme would go in.
Yeah. I don't honestly.
Oh, I should talk
we
about
wrote
the
this so long
I should
ago
talk
now.
about the
I'm
process.
having a hard
Before I
time.
play this, let me explain what you're going to hear. So we get the scene, and then we do two things. We have to first tempo map, and if it's an action sequence, we really rely on that. Even if not, we still rely on our tempo map. So we're thinking about where the beats are, how, you know, where's the downbeats, where the cuts are, and we're trying to find a tempo for the music that will match those beats. And sometimes it's a bit of a compromise, and sometimes you drop beats. Like if you're in 4/4, you might suddenly have a bar in 5/4 or 3/4 or something, just so you're ending up logically with the cut. You're really following the cut as your guide. So that's the first process. So, you know, in this particular scene, we knew the front half was going to be sound design, and the tempo really didn't matter. It's going to be all this kind of just ambient sort of sound. And then as soon as the scene with Doc and the confrontation with Bolshar begins, we thought, okay, well, here we have to figure out what's the tempo going to be, what's the pace of it, what's it feel like. And Pete's Bolshar theme is kind of got a plodding kind of tempo like this. So I kind of felt like I actually took the lead on this scene with Pete's theme, and I create a piano score, just a piano sketch. I literally just play, once I figure out the tempo, I'll just play melodies, or in this case, you know, it's nice to have character themes because you can use that as your starting point. So I played the Bolshar theme, and then I deviated from that and made up just kind of like this. I knew it had to build because it's, as you can see from the way it's cut, the back and forth, the getting close-ups on the eyes, the intensity of what Bolshar's saying, Doc's fear. We knew this thing had to escalate. And so after we played Bolshar's theme, it just became this slow, long build. So you're going to hear that in the piano, but it's going to sound really funny as a piano score. You can start playing it, Dustin, pardon me.
See an uncanny ancient stairway by any chance?
So here, because we keep going,
Doc?
but we it's really hard to make a piano score of what you know you can do with synthesizers or with cellos or other instruments. So I didn't even play anything in this. It's just kind of space. But rather than fast forward, we'll just have to watch it until when we get to the next bit after he freaks out.
Who was there?
So we thought, yeah, the music would probably start around here.
What child is that? No, don't take me back there! Don't take me back there!
It's only just piano the whole way through.
You will do my bidding, John Henry Holiday. It is you. Bullshit. Many names. How shall I coerce you?
So this little rising thing, you know,
You felt the pain.
it's like a
The searing
old trick from rock and roll. You just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, and it just feels like it's getting more intense. It's easy to build it when you repeat it. a little harp in there
The
too.
reminders
Put 2
of your
tracks.
destiny, the eternal suffering needing a cure. What caused a simple exchange?
Doc! Where am I? Where did he go? Who?
So that's
Snowy
stage 2.
Owl.
And the third stage is the fun stage where we really go back and forth between our 2 studios. We actually work in 2 different houses, studios, not far from each other.
Is it worth it? Can I describe the process to
Oh,
you?
yeah, you
Are
gotta
you okay
go.
with this? All right. So this part's actually really can be quite comical, but it's a huge joy for me. I love doing this part. So like sometimes Rob will write a sketch like that, and he'll send me that file and some other sort of computer nerdy stuff that I need. But then he'll also record like a dialogue track of him kind of narrating what he thinks, like what he's picturing, and it'll be it'll be comical. It'll be like, okay, so we're gonna go along here, and then like, ooh, like bobo drums, boom, 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 and then like around here, John, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, and it's very funny.
For you.
Well, for me. And as a bit of a prank at the end of season 1, I took them all and remixed them into a track, and then we played them over the credits just as a bit of a joke. But anyway, but I actually find it really interesting because I think Rob's an incredible composer, and it sort of gives me insight into how he's picturing the scene. So I've actually learned a lot just from these very weird a cappella
And
tracks.
we've gotten to the point now where he does a track now for me on some
Yeah.
of his cues, so I'll get to hear his.
So I'm sure he's going to blackmail me with those soon. Anyway, so then I'll listen to those, and I'll often layer in like weird sound design and synths and stuff, and drums and percussion. And then I'll take that session and send it back to Rob, and then he'll add all of his stuff on top of it there.
This scene felt like a really classic kind of film, bad guy, good guy confrontation.
It's very
Empire
Return of the
Strikes-
Jedi.
Return of the Jedi. It had all those kind of sentiments to me. So I felt, well, we're going to go orchestral here. So then my next stage was to write I augmented the piano sketch with strings, but then I'm like, Pete, this needs like a real like crazy amount of drums, backbeat, like so this is his specialty. So on my dialogue track, I'm sure I said that we're going to play now for you the entire score. We didn't really pre-mix this, so the dialogue might get obscured, and that's what they do in the final mix stage. It's actually, obviously, the dialogue is the most important thing, and so all the elements like Foley and sound effects and dialogue, like I was mentioning, they all get mixed.
And then they turn the music way down.
Yeah, and they turn the music down, but this is a music panel, so you're going to hear a lot of the score.
See an uncanny ancient stairway by any chance? Doc?
So that's like a cello.
Two shakes.
It's 2 cellos.
Who was there? What child is that? No, don't take me back there! Don't take me back there!
Serum torches atom or
it is. That's from Wynonna Earp.
Well, that was awesome. So we have a little bit of time left for questions. If anybody has any, they can come on up and ask a question. Yeah, or you can take her the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
This is awesome for me. I'm so excited. Thank you for taking the time to talk about this with us. Wynonna Earp has been, they talk a lot about how they don't have a huge budget. And so the scene that's had the music that's meant the most to me, or like really stood out, is the last scene of the first episode of season 3, when Wynonna and Waverly are in the car, and it's got to look like it's a car crash, but obviously it's not, big budget car crash, but it was in slow motion, and then you had this music playing that is so opposite of a crash. Was it always in slow motion, and what was it like getting that music for something that was so beautiful, for something so aggressive?
This is actually my favorite scene. And it's so funny because I was just thinking like, oh no, I should have talked about that scene. Thanks, Kat. That was a happy accident, in that, yes, it was always cut in slow motion. And when we received the cut, I think there was just a piece of score.
Yeah, I think we were originally supposed to score
The
that.
guys were originally supposed to score that whole thing. And when we had a meeting with Emily, she thought, it'd be kind of cool if it was like a song moment, but I don't know, play around with it and see what happens. But so originally we were going to have just a song play in the truck, and then the guys would take over for the car crash. But when I started kind of experimenting with songs, that was the first one. I can't remember. We might have tried no, we didn't. That was the only song that we tried in that scene. And when we lined it up, originally it was just supposed to play in the car, and then we just kept letting it play, and all of a sudden Kyle and I were like, what is happening? And it was just this beautifully crafted, I don't know, moment, and we were like, wow, this is pretty cool and dark and counterpoint. And it's interesting, so the song is called Darkness Falls, and I had that song, I pulled it for a different scene that we didn't end up using it in. And so I always just kind of had it on my radar, just in my back pocket. And I don't know, it's this, like this Patsy Cline sounding like vintage country song, which is kind of like happy, but there's these really dark lyrics. And I thought, wow, this is really saying something in this moment. But I don't know. It was just, I loved how it came together. But originally, when I was thinking about, hey, what should I try here? The name of the episode is called Blood Red and Going Down, which is a Tanya Tucker song. And I originally thought, oh, it'd be really cool if we could license that song. But for budget reasons, that was not going to happen. But I remember thinking that led me to, oh yeah, I have a couple of these like old vintage songs that were kind of licensable within our budget. And I thought I'd try them there. So once I remembered, we have this weird, dark, happy country song. We put it against picture, and it just kind of did its magic.
When you talk about slam dunk moments, I remember we were supposed to score that. And I remember the moment I was in my studio, and you sent me an email. You're like, Peter, I don't think you have to score it. Check this out. And I hit play, and it was just one of those like bomb drop, like there's no way we can write anything better than this. Like I remember it was awesome. And I wrote you back, and I was like, this is it. Because you killed it.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Questions?
So you've talked about having songs kind of in your pocket or whatever, like having alternates. Like, how do you, what's your process for having those songs in a list somewhere? Like what do you do to have a bank of songs or whatever?
Sure. So I just gather things as I go. Like before season 3, even when the season started, even before I started getting scripts, people send me music all the time. Managers, artists, songwriters, record labels, publishers. I also just kind of dig under rocks. I go into a rabbit hole of Spotify and SoundCloud and just word of mouth. And as soon as I hear something that remotely sounds like Wynonna Earp, I file it and organize it. And once we found the sound of the show, it was easier to organize music as it came in. Something would sound like, oh, this sounds like it would play in Shorties. This sounds like a Way Hot song. This sounds like a badass Wynonna song. This sounds like a cool, like old country vintage Doc song. And so that's kind of how I organize it on this show. It's different on every show, but it seems to work that way on this show. Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
Over there.
Hello? Oh, wow. Hot mic. So it's funny, I had one question I was gonna ask, but then we just went through that, and now I just completely changed my question. So when you're doing this for like the orchestral side, with horns, because you don't actually, like, do you actually bring in musicians, like when you have like, like French horns and like everything to use, or is it all digital? Like kind of how does that work in the orchestral?
That's a good question. I
way
mean,
of going?
the question, yeah, how much of that is synth? I guess most of it is. Pete and I both play a number of instruments, and Pete actually brought a toy. I wonder if it'll work here.
Yeah, I'll answer the question. I'll show you after.
So on something like that, I mean, obviously, we're not the orchestral sounds are being generated by synths, but I play things like saxophone and clarinet and flute, and so like Willa's theme is played live on flute. The Demon Scream, which you hear at the very end of the show, the end credit, that's a bunch of saxophones going crazy. And on a score like that, like pianos and things are live. And we often bring in some strings like violin or cello. Has been a big hit. So, and that's the front part of that was all live stuff with maybe some horns and also a lot of cello. And then a lot of it though is synthetic. Percussion is all, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have real drums, like the very last scene of 302 where Dolls has died and we piano. That's all real drums.
In addition to that, we're also constantly trying to kind of come up with far out sounds. But the problem with a lot of those libraries is it's like you buy the Hans Zimmer drum library and every composer has the Hans Zimmer drum library, right? Which, I mean, it does sound great, but it's, it has a certain sonic stamp. So we're always kind of trying to come up with new sounds for this show that other people don't have. Like, for example, there's a whole thing in that where I made a whole library of me like scraping my piano and bashing on the strings. So you hear that throughout that a lot. And that's like, everyone's heard scraped piano before, but that's like my scraped piano, so no one else has it. But then like another thing we did in season 1, now I don't know if this is actually going to work, but the Black Badge theme so whenever the Black Badge came on, there's this weird sort of distorted, like kind of like weird electronic thing that plays. And that's actually, this might not work, but this is kind of funny. It's actually these. So I bought these at Valley Village years ago. And they're just like,
You gotta see this thing.
yeah. So they're just like, they're
what
toys.
What is he thinking? Is this like a professional musician? What is this?
Well, no, but then I went through this phase years ago where I got really into circuit bending stuff. So I would like rip them open, and there is a little bit of method to the madness, but I don't know if they work like sometimes.
I hope it works. I really hope it works.
Okay, so let's just see if I can make it do some weird.
This is what he does. Sorry, pardon me. This is what he does all day long.
There we go. So, like, the Black Badge is just a bunch of this. And like, oh, that sound there, that totally happens
But
in the Black
these
Badge.
keyboards didn't come that way. You took them, you broke
Yeah, like, I don't know if you can see it.
disassembled them and
there's all sorts
rebuilt
of, like,
them.
weird knobs on it and stuff.
He's rigged it up.
But I recorded like just like, I don't know, 20 minutes of me just dicking around on these, and then chopped up all the sounds and made kind of libraries out of them so that I can turn them into these sort of rhythmic things. So if you go back, if you go back and watch any of the Black Badge scenes, you'll hear this weird distorted like thing, and that's this, and maybe this. This hasn't worked for years, but yeah. Yeah. Anyway. kinda
Well,
neat.
unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions. But yeah.
I did want to say one quick thing. I think we're doing a meet and greet right after this somewhere, but I wanted to mention to you guys, we created, I know that there's been a lot of fans of the music and people have been asking, we've created download cards, which have about 75 minutes or more actually of music from seasons 1 and 2. If you're curious, so they're going to be, I think we're selling them for like $5, and they have like I said, over 28 tracks and lots of music from seasons 1 and 2. So we have these for you after wherever we're going. I'm not sure where we're going, but
Yeah,
there's
I'd
a
probably
meet
take
and
you
greet
guys.
at the autograph area. We'll be there.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Georgie.
Thank you guys for coming out and speaking to us. I think we all really enjoyed that.